I almost didn't thank her. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because the gift itself was so small, so ordinary, that making a big deal out of it felt unnecessary. I was raised to say thank you for everything, of course, but this wasn't the kind of present that demanded a speech. It was the kind of thing you smile about, tuck away, and move on from. If I'd known what was about to happen next, I would have chosen my words a lot more carefully. The dinner was supposed to be simple, just family, just cake, just one quiet evening that wouldn't turn into one of those stories. I should have known better. Any gathering that included my Aunt Lydia was never just a gathering. Lydia had a way of taking up space without raising her voice. She didn't need to shout. She just needed an audience. She arrived late, of course. She always did. Not fashionably late, strategically late. Long enough for everyone to notice the door opening, long enough for conversations to stall mid-sentence. I was in the kitchen with my mother when we heard her heels. Click, click, click. "Here we go," my mother murmured. I sighed. Maybe she'll behave tonight. My mother gave me a look that said she admired my optimism but did not share it. The dinner filled quickly after that. My cousins argued over seats, my uncle poured drink a little too generously, my grandmother sat at the head of the table, smiling patiently, pretending not to notice the tension that always followed Lydia like perfume. I took my usual place near the end of the table. Not invisible, but not central either. That was fine by me. This dinner was for my promotion. Nothing huge, no title change that would impress strangers, no corner office, but it mattered to me. I'd worked hard for it, quietly, without shortcuts. My parents were proud. That should have been enough. Halfway through dinner, gifts came out. It wasn't even supposed to be a gift-giving event, but family rules were flexible. My mother handed me a small box with a ribbon, my dad slipped me an envelope with a card and a smile, my cousins gave me wine, candles, things that smelled expensive but weren't. Then Lydia stood up. "I have something too," she announced. Of course she did. She reached down beside her chair and lifted a small paper bag. Brown, unbranded, the kind of bag you'd get from a pharmacy or a bookstore. The room went quiet. Lydia didn't move right away. She waited, let the silence stretch, let the curiosity thicken. Then she walked over and placed the bag in front of me. "For you," she said, smiling. I blinked. "Thank you," I said, already feeling the heat of attention crawl up my neck. Inside the bag was a simple keychain, leather, black, neatly stitched. Nothing flashy, no logo, no weight to it. It was nice. Just nice. I smiled genuinely. "Thank you, Aunt Lydia. This is really thoughtful." I meant it. It felt personal, understated, something I'd actually use. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt the shift. Lydia's smile changed. It sharpened. "Thoughtful?" she repeated. The table went quiet. I hesitated. "Yes?" She laughed. A soft, amused sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "that's not just thoughtful." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" my mother asked cautiously. Lydia tilted her head toward me. "Tell them what it is," she said. I looked down at the keychain again, confused. "It's a keychain?" I said, unsure why my voice sounded like a question. The laughter stopped. Lydia straightened. "That," she said, clearly, loud enough for the entire table, "is a Mercedes." The room froze, not figuratively, literally. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses hovered inches from mouths. Someone inhaled sharply and forgot to exhale. I stared at her. "I'm sorry?" I said. She smiled wider. "The keys," she clarified, tapping the bag, "to your Mercedes." Silence crashed down so hard it felt physical. My cousin dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the plate, the sound echoing far too long in the quiet. My father frowned. "Lydia,
What are you talking about?" Lydia waved him off. "I wanted it to be a surprise," she said, "but I suppose the moment's past now." I felt dizzy. "Aunt Lydia," I said slowly, "I don't have a Mercedes." She raised an eyebrow. "You do now." Everyone started talking at once. "What? When? You bought her a car? Why didn't you say anything?" My grandmother leaned forward, eyes wide. "Lydia, are you serious?" Lydia nodded serenely, soaking it in. "Of course I am." My mother turned to me. "Did you know about this?" "No, I swear, I didn't." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This couldn't be happening. I hadn't seen a car outside, no bow, no dramatic reveal, no keys handed over ceremoniously, just this. The keychain felt suddenly heavy in my hand.
Lydia crossed her arms. "I thought I'd do something special," she said. "You've always been so modest." That word landed wrong. "And I figured," she continued, "you could finally drive something that matches your potential." My cousin snorted. My uncle raised his eyebrows. "That's generous." Lydia smiled smugly. "Well," she said, "I believe in rewarding ambition." My mother's voice was tight. "Where is the car?" Lydia waved vaguely. "Oh, it's being delivered." "When?" She didn't say. "To where?" Also unclear. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly. Lydia turned to me, expression unreadable. "I know. That's what makes it a gift." Something about the way she said that sent a chill through me. I looked around the table. Some people looked impressed. Some looked skeptical. Some looked uncomfortable. I caught my mother's eye. She looked worried. My father looked angry. And Lydia? Lydia looked satisfied. "I don't understand," I said. "Why didn't you talk to me about this first?" She laughed softly. "Because then you might have said no." The room went quiet again. My grandmother cleared her throat. "Lydia, gifts like that usually come with conversations." Lydia shrugged. "Not when you're confident." That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about generosity. This was about control. I set the keychain down slowly. "I appreciate the gesture," I said carefully, "but I can't accept something this big without understanding what it involves." Lydia's smile thinned. "Involves?" she echoed. "Yes, insurance, payments, registration. I didn't plan for—" "Oh, don't be silly," she interrupted. "I've taken care of everything." My heart sank. Everything. That word was doing a lot of work. My cousin leaned in. "So you just bought her a Mercedes? No strings?" Lydia's eyes flickered just for a second. "Of course not. Why would there be strings?" I didn't like how fast she answered. I picked up the keychain again. It was heavier than before. Not physically, emotionally. "I need time," I said. "This is a lot." Lydia tilted her head again. "Take all the time you need," she said sweetly. "The car isn't going anywhere." Something in her tone told me that wasn't entirely true. Dinner never recovered. Conversation tried to restart, but it stumbled over itself. Everyone kept glancing at the bag in front of me like it might explode. I barely tasted my food. My mind raced. Why would she do this? Why now? Why this way? And why did it feel like accepting this gift would cost me far more than money? As the night wound down, Lydia leaned close to me. "So," she said softly, "what do you think?" I met her eyes. "I think I need to know why you really did this," I replied. Her smile returned, slow, deliberate. "Oh," she said, "you will." And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. because when everyone froze at that table, it wasn't just because of the word Mercedes. It was because instinctively they all understood the same thing I did. This gift wasn't free, and whatever came next was going to change everything. Nobody touched dessert. That alone told me how deeply the moment had landed. The cake sat untouched in the center of the table, candles melted into waxy puddles, frosting beginning to sag. Normally, that would have bothered my grandmother. She hated waste, but even she seemed frozen in place, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on Lydia like she was trying to see through her instead of at her. I was still holding the keychain. I hadn't realized it until my fingers started to ache. "Let's all just take a breath," my mother said finally, her voice too calm, which meant she was barely holding it together. Lydia waved her hand dismissively. "Why? This is a happy occasion." "For who?" my father asked sharply. That was the first time someone had challenged her directly that night. Lydia turned to him slowly. "For your daughter," she said, obviously. I swallowed. "It doesn't feel happy," I said quietly. The room stilled again. Lydia's eyes flicked to me, surprised, not because I spoke, but because I spoke without apologizing. "That's just shock. Big gifts do that." "No, it feels invasive." My mother inhaled sharply. Lydia laughed once, short and incredulous. "Invasive? I bought you a car." "You announced it in front of everyone without asking," I said. "That matters." Her smile faded just a fraction. My uncle cleared his throat. "Lydia, maybe you should explain the situation a little better." She straightened in her chair. "There's nothing to explain." "Then explain why no one's seen the car," my cousin muttered. Lydia shot her a look. "It's being stored." "Where?" my father asked. Lydia paused. Just a beat too long. "At one of my properties," she said smoothly. That pause didn't go unnoticed. I felt something shift inside me. Properties. Plural. She always did this, dropped little reminders of her wealth into conversations like breadcrumbs, daring people to question her. "I don't want a car tied to your property," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Why not?" "Because then it's not really mine," I replied. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier, more alert. Lydia leaned forward. "You're reading too much into this." "Then answer one question," I said, my heart pounding. "Whose name is on the title?" She blinked. Just once, then smiled. "Well, obviously mine, for now," she said lightly, "until everything's finalized." My mother stood up. "No," she said firmly. "That's not a gift." Lydia scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You're offering her something that keeps you in control. That's not generosity." Lydia's jaw tightened. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns my daughter, which means it concerns me." I set the keychain down on the table. The sound it made was small, but it felt enormous. "I'm not accepting this," I said. Lydia stared at me. "I didn't say that," she replied coolly. "I did. I can't accept something with conditions I didn't agree to." Her eyes flashed. "What conditions?" she demanded. "The tile," I said. "The storage. The fact that you announced it publicly instead of privately. The fact that you won't answer basic questions." She laughed, but it sounded strained. "You're being ungrateful." My cousin shifted uncomfortably. My grandmother spoke then, quietly. "Lydia, if it's truly a gift, why does it need so much explanation?" That hit harder than anything else. Lydia looked genuinely offended. "Because she's interrogating me." "No," my grandmother said. "She's protecting herself." I hadn't realized my hands were shaking until my father reached over and squeezed them. "You don't owe anyone gratitude for something you didn't consent to," he said. Lydia stood abruptly. "This is unbelievable," she snapped. "I try to do something nice and I'm attacked." No one responded. That silence, that refusal to soothe her, was new. And she felt it. She turned to me, eyes sharp. "Do you have any idea how expensive that car is?" "Yes, that's why I'm saying no." "You're embarrassing me," she hissed. I met her gaze. "You embarrassed yourself." Gasps rippled around the table. My mother whispered my name, half warning, half proud. Lydia's face flushed. "You think you're better than this?" she said. "Better than me?" "No," I replied. "I think I deserve autonomy." That word stopped her cold. Dinner ended shortly after that. Not officially, just quietly. People stood, chairs scraped, goodbyes were mumbled. Lydia didn't hug anyone. She grabbed her purse and walked out without looking back. The door slammed. The house exhaled. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I don't feel like it," I admitted. She smiled gently. "That's because standing up for yourself feels like grief before it feels like freedom." I nodded, throat tight. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. "You humiliated me." I stared at the screen. Then another message came. "That car is already paid for." Then another. "I hope you realize what you just threw away." I didn't respond. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail. Her voice was different, calmer.
Controlled. "Let's talk," she said, privately. "You overreacted last night. We can fix this." Fix this? As if the problem were a misunderstanding, not a boundary. I deleted the voicemail. 2 days passed, then 3. Then she showed up at my parents' house, unannounced. I wasn't there, but my mother told me everything. She said she wanted to clear the air, my mother said. Then she asked for my address. My stomach dropped. What did she say? That it wasn't mine to give, my mother replied. I exhaled shakily. "Thank you." She didn't like that, my mother added. Of course she didn't. That evening, Lydia emailed me. Long, detailed, polite on the surface. She outlined how the car was technically hers, but intended for my use, how she'd envisioned it as a symbol of her support, how my refusal had deeply hurt her. And then, buried in the middle of the email, one sentence stood out. "I only wanted to make sure you stayed close." I reread it 3 times. Stayed close? There it was, the truth slipping out. I replied with one sentence. "I don't want gifts that require proximity." I blocked her email. The fallout wasn't immediate. It never is. It came in whispers. Phone calls from relatives, comments at gatherings I skipped, stories reshaped to make her the wounded party. She meant well. She's always been generous. You know how she is. But something was different this time. People didn't push as hard, because they'd been at that table. They'd felt the freeze. They'd seen the control beneath the generosity. A week later, my cousin sent me a message. She never bought the car. I stared at the words. "What do you mean?" I typed. She bragged about it, but when Uncle Mark asked about the delivery, she dodged, said the dealership messed up. My chest tightened. So there was no Mercedes, no car, just a performance, a test, and I'd failed it in the best possible way. That night, I slept better than I had in years, because suddenly everything made sense. The public announcement, the vague answers, the pressure to accept immediately. She hadn't expected gratitude. She'd expected obedience. The next family gathering was tense. Lydia didn't attend. Her absence was loud. No one mentioned the car. No one mentioned the keychain. But I noticed something else. People spoke to me differently, more carefully, more respectfully, as if I'd crossed some invisible line they hadn't realized existed. I kept the keychain, not because it symbolized a Mercedes, but because it symbolized clarity. The moment I chose myself over spectacle, the moment I refused to be bought. I didn't know then what Lydia would do next. I only knew this.
She wasn't done, and whatever came next wouldn't be wrapped in paper and called a gift. Lydia didn't disappear after that. She repositioned, and that, I learned, was far more dangerous. For a few weeks after the dinner, things were quiet on the surface. No texts, no emails, no dramatic entrances at family events. If you didn't know her, you might have assumed she'd backed off, embarrassed or chastened by how the night had gone. Anyone who actually knew Lydia understood better. Silence for her was never surrender. It was strategy. The first ripple reached me through my mother. She called one evening, her voice tight in that careful way that meant she was choosing her words. "Your aunt's been asking questions," she said. "What kind of questions?" I asked, already bracing myself. "About your job, your finances, whether you're struggling."
I closed my eyes. "She's telling people you turned down the car because you're too proud," my mother continued, "that you don't like accepting help." I laughed bitterly. "That's not help, that's leverage." "I know," my mother replied, "but she's framing it as generosity you rejected." Of course she was. That was Lydia's specialty, rewriting reality until she emerged as the misunderstood benefactor. The next sign came at a cousin's birthday party I almost skipped. I went anyway, partly out of stubbornness, partly because I refused to let Lydia dictate my presence through absence. She wasn't there, but her influence was. I felt it in the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that paused when I walked by, the way people seemed unsure whether to congratulate me on my promotion or console me for turning down the car. At one point, a distant relative pulled me aside. "I heard you had a falling out with Lydia," she said gently. "She was only trying to help." I met her eyes. "Did she tell you she never actually bought the car?" I asked. The woman blinked. "She said the dealership delayed delivery." I nodded slowly. "Interesting," I said, "because the dealership doesn't exist." The woman's face changed, just slightly, confusion replacing certainty. "Oh," she said. That one word felt like a small victory. I didn't go around correcting everyone. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of leaking out on its own, especially when Lydia tried too hard to control it. People began noticing inconsistencies, the missing details, the vague timelines, the dramatic retellings that never quite lined up, and Lydia, sensing the shift, escalated. She sent me flowers, not to my apartment, to my office. A massive arrangement, white lilies and roses, tasteful but unmistakably expensive, a card tucked neatly into the bouquet. "Always proud of you, no matter what." My coworkers gathered around, impressed. I smiled politely. Then I asked the receptionist to remove them. I didn't take them home. I didn't thank her. I didn't acknowledge them at all. That silence spoke louder than any confrontation. That night, she called.
From a private number. I let it go to voicemail. "Why are you doing this?" her voice demanded. "Why are you trying to make me look bad?" I listened once, then archived it. The next move was more calculated. Lydia reached out to my boss, not directly, but through a mutual connection. The message was framed as concern. "She's under a lot of pressure," Lydia reportedly said. "I just want to make sure she's supported." Support. That word again. Luckily, my boss was smarter than Lydia gave her credit for. She called me into her office the next morning. "Your aunt seems involved," she said carefully. I nodded. That's what I'm trying to change. My boss studied my face for a long moment. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "You don't seem unstable to me." Relief washed through me. "I'll handle it if she contacts us again," my boss added. That was the moment I realized something important. Lydia's power only worked in silence. Once her behavior was named, it lost its mystique. A week later, the truth finally surfaced fully. At a family brunch I didn't attend, my uncle confronted her, in front of everyone. "Where's the car, Lydia?" he asked bluntly. According to my cousin, Lydia laughed it off at first, then deflected, then grew irritated, and finally snapped. "I don't owe anyone an explanation," she said.
That response told everyone exactly what they needed to know. There had never been a car, just a performance designed to put me in my place. That confrontation fractured something, not loudly, but permanently. People stopped repeating her version of the story. They didn't apologize to me outright, but they stopped defending her. And in a family like ours, that was monumental. Lydia didn't take that well. She sent me one final message. "You've changed. You used to appreciate what I did for you." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "I used to confuse control with care," I typed. "I don't anymore." Then I blocked her. Everywhere.
The aftermath surprised me. Not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. Life went on. Without her commentary, without her gifts, without her looming presence at every milestone. And I felt lighter. The keychain still sat in my drawer. I hadn't thrown it away. Not because I was sentimental, but because it reminded me of the moment everything became clear. The moment everyone froze. The moment Lydia revealed herself without realizing it. One evening, months later, my grandmother called. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "For what?" I asked. "For seeing it," she replied, "and not letting it buy you." I smiled softly. "It didn't feel brave at the time," I admitted. "It never does," she said. "Bravery usually feels like discomfort first." Lydia faded from my daily life after that. Not completely gone, but distant, muted, irrelevant. And I realized something profound. She'd only ever held power over me because I'd allowed her to frame the narrative. Once I stopped participating, the story ended. But this wasn't the end, because Lydia didn't just lose influence over me, she lost credibility with everyone else. And what came next wasn't about a Mercedes, it was about exposure. About what happens when someone who's built their identity on perceived generosity is finally seen clearly. And when that happens, the fallout is never quiet. Lydia didn't collapse under exposure, she hardened. And that, more than anything, confirmed what I had suspected all along. People who are generous don't panic when questioned. People who give freely don't need witnesses. People who mean well don't unravel when their version of events is examined. Lydia did all three. The shift was subtle at first. She stopped pretending to be hurt. She stopped reaching out indirectly. She stopped performing generosity. Instead, she leaned into something colder, distance with a message. The first sign came when my grandmother's birthday invitation arrived. Handwritten, formal, carefully worded. Everyone was invited, including Lydia, including me. No seating chart, no instructions, just an address and a time. I hesitated, not because I was afraid of seeing Lydia, but because I knew she wouldn't miss an opportunity to reclaim control in front of an audience. And I was right. She arrived early. Of course she did. Not to help, she never helped. To establish presence. By the time I arrived, she was already seated beside my grandmother, laughing loudly, retelling stories where she was the hero and everyone else existed in supporting roles. When she saw me, her smile didn't fade, it sharpened. "Well," she said brightly, "look who decided to show up." I nodded politely. "Hello, Aunt Lydia." No warmth, no hostility, just distance. That unsettled her more than anger ever could. She spent the first half of the evening ignoring me, not subtly, deliberately, speaking around me, over me, through me. She complimented my cousins loudly, asked about their jobs, their homes, their plans. When someone mentioned my promotion, she laughed. "Oh yes," she said, "I remember when she was just starting out." Just starting out, as if that hadn't been months ago, as if she hadn't tried to overshadow it with a fictional luxury car. I didn't correct her. I didn't react. I let the silence do its work. The moment came during dinner. My grandmother raised her glass. "I'm grateful," she said, "for honesty in this family, even when it's uncomfortable." Her eyes flicked, briefly but unmistakably, toward Lydia.
The table went quiet. Lydia froze, just for a second. Then she laughed too loudly. "Well, that's one way to put it," she said. My grandmother didn't smile. Later, Lydia cornered me in the hallway.
Not aggressively. Not yet. I don't like how you've been talking about me, she said. I met her gaze. I haven't been talking about you, I replied. That's the problem. Her nostrils flared. You let people think I lied, she said. You told people you bought me a Mercedes, I replied. That was your choice. You could have smoothed it over, she snapped. You could have played along. And taught everyone that lying publicly is acceptable if it benefits you? I asked calmly. She stared at me. You've become very self-righteous, she said. I smiled slightly. No, I replied. I've become uninterested in being controlled. That was when her tone changed. She leaned in, lowered her voice. You don't want to make an enemy of me, she said. I didn't flinch. I don't want to make you anything, I replied. That's your responsibility. She straightened, eyes cold. You think people are on your side, she said. They're just enjoying the drama. I tilted my head. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm not lying to maintain a role. That hit. I saw it land. From that night on, Lydia stopped pretending. She stopped masking her resentment behind concern. She started telling a different story, one where I was ungrateful, difficult, changed by success. She implied I'd rejected her generosity because I was ashamed of where I came from. That one hurt, but it also backfired, because people remembered the dinner. They remembered the freeze. They remembered the unanswered questions. And now they were noticing her bitterness. The final crack came when my cousin confronted her privately. She never asked you for the car, my cousin said. Why did you make that up? Lydia snapped. I wanted to motivate her, she said. Push her. My cousin frowned. By lying? That's not lying. It's aspirational. The word spread. Aspirational. It became a quiet joke among relatives, a shorthand for exaggeration dressed as generosity. Lydia didn't realize it, but she'd lost the narrative.
She tried one last maneuver, an announcement. At a family gathering I didn't attend, she loudly declared she was donating a vehicle to charity instead. No point keeping it if it's unappreciated, she said. Someone asked where the vehicle was. She changed the subject. That was the end. Not with confrontation, with confirmation. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel victorious. I felt relieved. Because the tension I'd carried for years, the sense that I owed her something, was finally gone. Not because she changed, but because I saw her clearly. My life moved forward, without her shadow, without her gifts, without her influence. I bought my own car, not a Mercedes, something practical, reliable, fully mine. When I told my grandmother, she smiled. That one, she said, you won't have to thank anyone for. She was right. Months later, I found the keychain again, still in my drawer, still plain, still unremarkable. And yet, it marked the moment everything shifted, the moment a lie was exposed by its own weight, the moment control disguised as generosity collapsed under a single question. Lydia still exists, still talks, still performs, but now people listen differently, and I no longer need to, because what she tried to buy with spectacle, I reclaimed with clarity. Part 4 wasn't about confrontation, it was about detachment. The moment when someone's power fades because you stop feeding it. The moment when truth no longer needs defending.
And the moment you realize that the loudest freeze in the room wasn't about a Mercedes, it was about a woman losing the ability to control the story. The strange thing about power is that it rarely disappears all at once. It erodes, quietly, in moments no one applauds, in rooms where the person who once dominated no longer holds the center. That was how it ended with Lydia. Not with a confrontation, not with a confession, not even with an apology, but with irrelevance. The first time I realized it was over, truly over, was at a family gathering 6 months later. Nothing special, no birthday, no holiday, just one of those casual Sundays where people drift in and out carrying store-bought food and half-finished conversations. Lydia was there, and for the first time in my life, she wasn't the loudest person in the room. I noticed it immediately. She laughed, but people didn't turn toward her. She spoke, but conversations didn't pause to listen. She told stories, but no one leaned in. She was background, and she knew it. You could see it in the way she adjusted her posture, in the way her eyes kept scanning the room for reaction, in the way she repeated herself slightly louder each time, like volume alone might restore relevance. It didn't. I sat on the couch across the room talking quietly with my grandmother and a cousin. We were laughing, not politely, genuinely. And suddenly, Lydia was standing there. "So," she said brightly, "how's work?" The question felt rehearsed. I looked up. "It's good, busy." She waited, for praise, for elaboration, for something she could steer. It didn't come. "That's nice," she said after a beat. I smiled politely and turned back to my grandmother. Lydia stood there for a moment longer, then walked away. That moment did something inside me. Not triumph, closure, because I realized I didn't need her to admit anything. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to acknowledge the lie. Her loss of influence was the only resolution that ever mattered. Later that afternoon, my cousin leaned over and whispered, "She hates that she can't get under your skin anymore." I smiled softly. "She never really could," I said. "I just thought she did." I drove home that evening in my own car. Not flashy, not impressive, but paid for, insured, registered. Every mile belonged to me. And as I sat at a red light, I laughed out loud, alone, thinking about how the entire saga had started with a keychain. A small thing, unassuming, harmless looking, just like Lydia's generosity. People often ask me now if I regret how things unfolded, if I wish I'd handled it more gently, if I feel bad that Lydia's reputation took a hit. The answer surprises them. No, I regret how long I doubted myself. I regret the years I spent thanking people for things that made me uncomfortable. I regret confusing gratitude with obligation. But the rest? I'd do it again, every time. Because here's what changed after that dinner. I stopped accepting things that came with invisible contracts. I stopped letting people frame control as kindness. I stopped shrinking my instincts to preserve someone else's ego. And when you stop doing that, everything shifts. Lydia didn't vanish from the family. She still showed up, still spoke, still tried occasionally to reclaim her old position. But the spell was broken. People listened differently now. They asked questions. They noticed patterns. They remembered moments they'd brushed off before. And Lydia, for the first time, couldn't rewrite reality fast enough to keep up. I never publicly corrected her. I never told my side loudly. I didn't make announcements. I didn't need to. Because truth doesn't require a megaphone once people are ready to hear it. It just needs consistency. One evening, months later, my grandmother called me. "I want you to know something," she said. I smiled. "What's that?" "She offered to help me buy a new car," she said. My stomach tightened slightly. "And?" I asked. "I said no," my grandmother replied calmly. I told her I don't accept gifts that make me feel small. I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. She chuckled. "I learned that from you." That was the moment I understood the ripple effect. Standing up for yourself doesn't just protect you, it gives other people permission to do the same. Lydia never brought up the Mercedes again. Not once.
The story faded. People stopped mentioning it. It became one of those family moments that existed in collective memory without needing to be discussed. But every now and then, someone would glance at me knowingly when Lydia exaggerated something else, and I'd smile. Not smugly, peacefully. I threw the keychain away eventually. Not angrily, not ceremoniously. Just one morning, while cleaning out a drawer, I realized I didn't need the reminder anymore. The lesson had stuck. Looking back, the night everyone froze wasn't about money. It wasn't about a luxury car. It wasn't even about Lydia. It was about the moment control revealed itself and failed. Because control only works when people are afraid to question it. And I did the one thing Lydia never expected. I asked. I thanked my aunt for a simple gift, and when she claimed it was a Mercedes and everyone froze, I didn't play along. I didn't smile and nod. I didn't accept the story she wanted me to live inside. I chose clarity over comfort, truth over performance, self-respect over spectacle. And that choice, it changed everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The people who once thought generosity could buy silence think twice. The people who once watched quietly now speak up. And me? I live a life where nothing I own comes with strings attached, and that is worth more than any car, no matter the brand.